Great. Hi and welcome everyone. I'm Gigi Haycock, one of the programmers at SF Doc Fest, and welcome to SF Doc Fest 2023. I have the pleasure of having the director, writer, and editors, Robert Weiss and Aaron Weiss, who are first cousins. And they're here to speak about their film, and the most amazing person I've come across in a long time with a story is Dale Evans? Did I get that right?
Carter.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Dale Carter, sorry. Oh, there it is. I have it written up there. Okay, so thank you so much. And I don't really know where to begin with him exactly. I mean, this has been a 10-year project for you both. And so obviously you got to know him so very well. And I'm kind of curious about the title of the film. It's Cicada, which is kind of singular, when cicadas usually sing in, en masse, like at night and when it's super hot. Does that have something to do with Dale's feeling of isolation, or does that even come into?
I would say so, like, being a mortician, he often calls himself being feared and revered. And the creature, the cicada, is one of those kind of things, like you hear it very often, but sometimes you don't see it, or most of the time you don't see it, much like a funeral director who comes in the night and takes your loved one away. And right. People are really unfamiliar about how, like, the funerary process works and what goes into it until they actually have to deal with it right then for themselves. So it kind of has that, and then it also has just kind of a Southern Gothic vibe to it as well. But you mentioned a hot night. Somebody who doesn't have air conditioner in their old Victorian home, it's very much like a hot cicada night when you're down at Dale's house in the summer.
Gorgeous house. So can you just tell us a little bit about Dale? I mean, we've seen it in the film, basically, but I was just curious about his collections and his passion for all of that. And as you were saying too, about we don't really come in close contact with death, but in this film, we get to see a person who cares so very much about making it good for those, relatives or whoever's left behind after somebody dies.
Yeah, he really is driven by that need that people have for someone to help them, guide them through this process. Because we don't talk about it, you don't know what you're supposed to do in these situations. And he's devoted his career and his life to it. He doesn't get paid very much, and he is driven by the emotions that people feel in these situations, and wants to be there for them and really give them one more lasting picture memory that they can leave, that the loved ones can leave with.
And he's passionate about many things.
Absolutely, yeah. No, he is so passionate about it. I mean, we kind of touch on it in the film, but if there's been an accident or something where somebody's, was damaged, their body when they died, he will spend an extra 3 or 4 days working on that case to make sure the body is viewable for the family, and he's really adamant on it. So he wants an open casket that family has like a lasting, a last memory picture of their loved one. When they might not have seen him in such a good state. And it's really quite a beautiful thing. It's very touching to see how much time and effort he puts into something where somebody might just see it for 30 seconds and that's it. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's artistry, really, because when they talk about, I think it was a funeral director was talking about how no one does it like he does. It takes that time and could recreate a face that was, destroyed, basically. And that he comes close to a miracle, right? Performing a miracle.
Yeah, we all feel differently about viewing somebody in that state who's had that much trauma. But it's up to the family, and if they want to see it, then the funeral home will ask Dale if it's possible, and if he says yes, which most of the time he says yes, then he'll reconstruct, do what he needs to do for that family.
Yeah. So. There's quite a bit of humor in this film, I feel like, coming from Dale and also his sister when they were going through the cupboard with some of his things and talking about his childhood and kind of where he wanted to charge people to come in and see all of his, kind of macabre things that he's collected even when he was a kid. And then also when the German tourists on the Segway, and he starts going into what he found at the Beaumont house.
Yeah,
he's got no filter, and so you know he knows he's funny and he likes to make people laugh, but like that encounter, he had no idea, and you know, especially watching it at the premiere, he forgot that he had those people linger for so long, and he was telling them that story, so he was laughing hysterically at the premiere because he had forgotten he does that. So most of it's just who he is.
Stack of corn and a bunch of Vaseline. I mean, it's just hoarders. Anyway, that was just really good. And you could tell that the Germans were, okay. And the tour guide was like, okay, we got to go. So yeah, he definitely. So also I wanted to talk about the Beaumont house and his own house, and just what happens to them, and the kind of the tragedy and the love that he has so much for both of them, and then having to, give up the Beaumont house so that it may be able to be restored.
Yeah. As a child, Dale talked about, he said, other kids wanted, whatever for Christmas. He wanted books on antiques, and he wanted to be taken down to Galveston to look at old houses. And his family would go to the beach, and they would drive around and look at all the old homes. And he said that he always wanted to own something like that. And it had become quite apparent from knowing him for 10 years that he kind of wanted to create like a living museum sort of situation, or maybe even just a place where, different organizations could have tea at his house and have meetings and things like that. And that Beaumont house was that dream of creating a space that was a return to an earlier time in our history, like winding the clock back 100 years. And if anybody could do it, it would be Dale. I mean, if we were to make a film of the Victorian era, we would hire Dale as the art consultant, because he knows every single detail about everything from the Victorian era. And so it's really interesting. I mean, we've joked, if we had the money, we would just give it to him just to see what he would do with it. I mean, it'd just be so interesting to see him fix up an old house like that. But yeah, it was truly like a passion project of his, a labor of love. And you'll find out in the movie what happens with that project. I'm not sure if this Q&A will be played before or after, but I guess seeing what happens with that house is kind of a clear indication of his financial, what was going on financially in his life at the time, and trying to consolidate and make decisions that were best for himself and maybe not the house at the time.
Right. So going to that house, I'm interested in him dressing up as Carolyn Hinchy. And he had said he'd done it drag before when he was a kid, and that he could pass, and people would probably not notice that he was male, but probably not so much now when he dresses up. And he's taking tea somewhere out in public, I believe. Like, how did that come about?
Well, so when Dale got that house, he was acquaintances, or I guess friends with Clive Barker for some time, and he had talked about writing Clive a letter and saying, I bought this old house. Would you like to come here and shoot a film? And when Aaron and I went to see the house, which was the only night we ever went, was the night that he dressed up like Carolyn. We went back after the house had, been vandalized. We said, this is your documentary. What do you want to do at this house, and what do you want to do? And he suggested channeling the spirit of Miss Carolyn Hinchy. And he had tried many other ways to channel the spirit of Miss Hinchy, because he's quite mystical in that regard, even having a seance and some other things. And he really wanted to kind of feel what it was like to be her spirit and her presence, and kind of figure out what to do with the house. And it was also quite comedic too. I mean, Dale is very much knows that that would be read in a very kind of funny manner, I think. So it was kind of done lightheartedly. What was so funny is when we showed up, we said, do your thing and we're going to film you, maybe, or give us a tour of the place or whatever. And he didn't break character until the very end of that whole thing. I mean, he was really trying to be her and see what it was like to go back through his house or her house and see what her feelings were in regard to that. So regardless, it was a lot of fun doing that whole thing, but we didn't get much time to spend in the house, and being there and realizing that there's like giant holes in the floor, and it was quite dangerous even being in there, that it probably wasn't a great film set for Clive Barker, but it worked out for us. So
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's and so I'm kind of curious. I probably should have asked this a little sooner. Is how I know you met him, but how did it become this 10-year and process and how you got Dale to agree. I mean,
Well,
to
I'll tell the first part of this. I met Dale at a Halloween party over 10 years ago. It was the first time I'd ever met the guy. Somebody said, "Oh, you got to meet this guy over here in the cloak with the monocle on." So I went and talked to him, and I realized that it was more authentic than just a Halloween costume. And he invited me to come see his laboratory. He thought that he would maybe take me on as a student because I was studying anatomy and physiology at the time for my figure drawing course that I was teaching. And so I went there and I was amazed by the whole thing and a little bit shocked and scared, and calling Aaron afterwards and saying, "Hey, what do you think about making a film?" And Aaron and I went down there initially to shoot a project that turned out to be a wonderful collaboration that turned into my graduate thesis film about Dale. It was like a 15-minute film. And then Aaron can tell you a little bit more about the next 10 years that followed that too.
He called me and said, you got to meet this guy. Bring your camera. Let's just spend a weekend with him. And we spent, less than 48 hours filming what turned out to be around a 12 to 15-minute cut that we edited. And so we edited along the way up until we got to a feature length. But this 12-minute cut turned, everybody we showed it to was truly moved by it. And we knew we had, something special, and Dale had opened himself up to us, and started to become a friend. So we just kept we were drawn to continue to visit him every few months. We would go down there and spend a little time with him and add to our reels, and and then we would spend time to re-edit. Sometimes we'd go to Galveston and spend a week editing, and then going to get pickup shots. And for years we thought we were close to the end, but about 5 years into it, we got a grant from the Austin Film Society, and that's when we kind of really decided to turn it into a feature film. And so it shifted our gears. We really had to think a lot deeper about what we were, the story we were telling, instead of just kind of being reactive to what's going on to his life. And we had to try to frame it. But 3-4 times a year we would go down there and check in with him, and you can see all the excitement in his life, for better or worse. And we feel really really excited that people are resonating with this story, and that it's touching for many reasons.
yeah, I definitely, that's how I felt about it. And also the music that you chose, I think fits so well with what was going on, whether it's the shot of the hearse going down just kind of a fog-filled road, or all that stuff. How did you choose the music for this, and the piano, and
That was just the most fortunate situation. One of my very best friends from high school did all of the music, wrote all of that, and performed every instrument. Well, actually, I take it back. There was a violinist that came in and helped us with a few things, and a girls' choir. But he was incredible. We sat down with him about 3 or 4 times, and his name is Max Townsley. But I would say, what about if you did something like the Glenn Campbell song Galveston, but just a little more somber, like minor chord kind of thing? And he would do it right on the spot. It was just incredible. And so a lot of the music was written almost improvisationally, like on the spot, and worked out on the spot. I mean, he's really quite a talented individual. And I think he had such a good understanding of, I don't think he scored a film before, but he had a good understanding of, not letting it dominate the film, and not letting it be too overstated, but it's poignant and it's beautiful, and it moves the scenes along in such a wonderful way. I mean, we are really indebted to him, because it really made it an incredible film. And then Aaron didn't mention this, but towards the end of our 10 years of making this film, we had almost gotten a little bit gridlocked with the edit. So we had pulled on an editor named Paul Lovelace, who helped edit a film called Iris by, one of the Maisel brothers, that came out about 10 years ago. And he saw our journey into making a film that was kind of cinema verite-ish, but also modern. And he was able to put together our pieces and really help us figure out. We were indebted to him as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I felt that the music was comforting, even in the, even though the subject matter is, sad, or, I didn't feel like the music was sad. I just felt like you said, it kind of, it was in the background, but it moved the story along. I felt like really well. So
Yeah, I think if the music was a little more intense, especially in the laboratory, people might be more turned off, especially squeamish, people who are squeamish around blood or death. And so I think most people that see the film, even if they are sensitive or feel, like that it's comforting to drive them through, through the story.
yeah. And how about Zach Blood? He ends up having what, 4 kids, and by the end of the film, and
Yeah.
they're all running around the I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if any of those kids will go on to be morticians in the film. They in the field. They came to the screening we had at the Fort Worth Lone Star Film Festival, and it was nice for them to see after a couple of years. They had grown a little bit older. I mean, just a few years older, but it was nice they were so excited to see themselves on the screen, and they're genuinely interested. I mean, his little girl in particular was so interested in in every single part of the process and wanted to see everything. And they're not squeamish at all. They're not worried about it one bit.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
They were rolling underneath the coffins and everything. I just love that.
And getting in them and everything. I mean, yeah, no, it's a pretty bizarre, I remember seeing that film, My Girl, when I was a kid, about the girl that lived in the funeral home, and it must be a totally different world to grow up in and around a funeral home like that. And I mean, it'd be interesting to see how that, affects them later on in life by having seen all that so young. But
is Zach still working with Dale?
Zach's not working with Dale. I don't know where he is. At last I heard he was in San Antonio, but not living in Galveston anymore.
Okay, great. I think his last name Blood was kind of interesting.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Dale talks about, I can kind of read it here. He's talking about it, a lens, a filter, a lens, just like a camera. And that's what he uses, that filter, to make it so that the loved ones will see somebody, with the care that he's given to embalming, basically.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just an interesting, connection to your, the lens of a camera.
Yeah.
And also what he's doing.
He is really so sensitive to that, actually. I know that he's mentioned to me before, like a lot of, when an older woman dies, oftentimes their hairdresser they've had for 15, 20 years. So the hairdresser will volunteer to do their hair one last time, before they're put into the casket. And he said that's very sensitive for those people, especially even like a hairdresser, somebody who kind of really has dialogue with them once a week or twice a week. And so he said, I always play classical music in the room so that they can hear it from the hallway. And I always keep the doors open so that we're not having to open a portal to another world. And he said, so I want that transition to be very soft, coming into there. It's very much, he talks like an artist does, like using terms that an artist does whenever he's talking about that lens and that filter. Because if you're to throw somebody into that world, I mean, the first time I ever went in there, he said, what you're going to see is going to be shocking and it's going to change your life forever. And I kept thinking to myself, why is he being so dramatic? But it really is dramatic. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's very, yeah.
He has that one person faint as soon as he starts to open up.
That's not the only instance of that. He told us a bunch of other scenarios like that where people would faint and pass out, and students of his and stuff.
Yeah. He's like, well, I didn't mean to make him faint. I love that's another part of his humor, I feel like, coming through. I guess I want to ask what I may not have asked that you want to tell the people who've seen this film. I know you all said that maybe this isn't the time to touch on how Dale is now.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say something brief. It's a slice of life. It's a slice of somebody's life, and life goes on. And life doesn't always get easier too. But we hope that people go into this film. It's a film about a mortician, which often can turn people off. I've told people what it's about and they go, ugh, but give it a chance. It's a really touching, introspective look at somebody's life who's faced a lot of adversity and come through it. And not only that, but used it to help other people and to really connect with people and get to know people and get to know himself more than anything.
Yeah. He definitely has that Southern charm. You know, when he's telling those tourists, come back anytime, you know, you're welcome here. It's just so heartwarming. And he's a fascinating person.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add, Aaron?
Oh, the film ends with him talking about how he's a survivor, and he doesn't like to complain, but in the last couple year he's experienced more adversity, but he carries on, and even though he might be prone to it, he learns how to move forward.
Yeah.
I think when you think, his sister kind of said this in one of the interviews, I don't think we ended up including it, but just saying, like, his mind is going 100 miles a minute on everything that's beautiful and grand. I mean, when he's in the embalming studio, he's listening to Franz Liszt on volume 10. I mean, and when he's at home, he has his record player and his tea set, and it's like he's like in a different era. And I think when you live like that, when you really want to build something grand, it has the chance of things falling apart. And that kind of happens in the film, but you realize that, you are who you are despite what's around you or your profession or anything else too. So I hope it touches on a lot of different issues for people, but I hope, we've found that by showing the film and talking to people afterwards, that they're usually touched by the film and have never seen anything quite like it, and a perspective on the embalming world and the world of the funeral home that's just completely unique, because unfortunately there's just not a lot of documentaries about the funeral world, and this one's a very honest, I think, look at it. So
yeah, and he lives in a time capsule, and it's just fascinating on every single surface, and you can tell his mind's going, 1,000, he's just, always thinking of something. And when he was walking around and looking at all those homes in Galveston, knew all about them.
Everything.
It's just, yeah, he just wants to know.
Yeah. And I know Dale has a little bit of dyslexia, so he has people read things to him and he memorizes it after it's been read to him once, because he will recite poetry. And Aaron and I found this constantly, that he would recite stuff, and we would look it up later because while we're watching footage to see if he was correct. And he was almost always correct, and had things memorized perfectly. And that's also unique in itself. That I said, when was the last time somebody read that to you? He said, 35 years ago. And he still remembered it. It was just amazing.
That's incredible.
I
love, yeah. So I really appreciate this film, and I think a lot of people will. And thank you guys so much for doing it and presenting it. And I know it's kind of at the end of the festival circuit, but I hope it continues on, in whatever form. So I'm glad you're here for the SF Doc Fest.
Yeah, we're honored to be a part of it. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're really happy. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys.
And thanks, Gigi.
Bye.
Bye-bye.